There's a psychedelic called 5-MeO-DMT or Bufo, and a lot of people, when they do this very strong psychedelic, stop managing their breathing at some point, and so they won't take a breath for a long time, and there can be a lot of fear, like extreme fear, survival fear, that I'm never going to breathe again. And eventually, happens automatically as a reflex. But this fear can also keep people from going deeper into the experience and letting go. From the fear that if I stop managing my breathing completely, I'll just die. And it might sound a little absurd or a little silly, but it's not at all silly when someone experiences that. And what it shows is that some of us, many of us, are actually managing our breathing breath by breath. Whereas there's a possibility to recognize that the body will do it on its own too. Breathing is the only bodily function that's part of the voluntary and involuntary nervous system. So it can be completely involuntary or it can be completely voluntary. And no other function has that kind of flexibility. I've become aware of, through practices of meditation just by observing breath, I've been becoming aware that it can happen on its own to radical new degrees that I wasn't aware of before. And when I experience that, I see that it's so deeply relaxing. Relaxing is not the right word because it's deeper than relaxation in the common sense. It's like an existential hook that we've been hooked on, or I was hooked on, until that realization. And even now, I can feel like, yeah, I can allow it to be 70% automatic, but because I'm not meditating and we're doing this right now, there's some automatic habits of managing the breathing. And the belief there is that I'll die if I don't do this, if I don't manage this. I have to be on top of it. And this translates into all areas of life because this is very deep, deeper than the mind, way deeper than the mind. This bodily nervous system belief that I have to be on top of it, this existential distrust, which translates into a nervous system distrust over any bodily function that has a voluntary and an involuntary component. So, with seeing this, I recognize that I'm using a lot of my energy for breathing. And I'd like to just allow it to be automatic, like it kind of already is. And of course, when we're in our minds thinking or really engaged in activity, it is happening automatically, but we're not aware of it. And our system is like managing it, but not really managing it. It gives our conscious mind the belief that we are managing it, but we're not needed, and we're actually probably doing much less than the story in our head goes. We have so many functions that we're doing that have the underlying belief that something bad will happen if we stop them. And breathing is perhaps the most fundamental one. And resolving that will touch all these other actions we're doing that have this underlying belief that something bad will happen if we stop doing them. Because everything is touched by what happens with the breath. Every aspect of mind and emotions is touched by the impact of our breathing. Interestingly, I've found that as I, in meditation, and by meditation I just mean sitting there, nothing fancy, just sitting there. As I release control of the breath and let it do what it wants, once I understood that the body will breathe as it needs to, the breathing was very irregular and erratic, and not the what my mind has an idea of as good healthy breathing, like not at all. There were long, there was an exhale, then I would stop. There'd be a tension. I would clench my belly, or not clench it, but just stop the breath. And then 4 seconds later, the exhale would continue, and then stop, and then continue, and then I'd stop, and no inhale would come yet. And then another little exhale would happen, and then a big kind of gasping inhale through the nose. Always breathe through the nose, unless you're doing some specific thing that requires mouth breathing. Always breathe through the nose. Tongue on the roof of your mouth. So I was wondering, what is that? Why is my breathing so irregular? Because it actually, when I was really living in the understanding that the body would breathe on its own and I can stop managing it, I could see that this breathing was objectively really irregular, but I wasn't experiencing stress like I did in the past when I was managing my breathing and not breathing well, let's say, like with nice full exhales. So I was taking a lot less breaths. They were lasting a long time. They were stop and start. The inhales would be big, sharp inhales and a long time, and an exhale, which was involved like my stomach's like kind of clenching or the breath stopping and starting. And yet I felt free of anxiety, or at least deeply peaceful with the anxiety. I was letting it all flow. There wasn't a latching on, a holding on. And this non-latching, non-holding was happening at a deeper layer than emotions, like even anxiety. There could be fear and anxiety, but there's a calmness beneath them. There's a wellness, a groundedness in the body itself, the organism itself, without the brain. So how I'm understanding this, and how it relates back to 5-MeO, Bufo, fearing that I'm going to die if I let go because I can't manage my breathing anymore. How it relates back to that is I recognized with the Bufo, the DMT, it takes us to this really deep, calm place in the body where our managing system can't really operate that well. It sort of really turns down the ability for the managing system, the tension to operate. And the tension and the management is how we normally breathe. Most of us. So, what was happening with me with all the starts and stops is that when I gave the body full ability to do its thing, all of these subconscious tensions came up, which are normally always there, but because I wasn't managing it, I was able to see what these tensions were doing. Normally, I manage the breath, so I just, and I say normally I manage, I'm not consciously doing breath work or anything. It's something that something that just happens. And fucking pissed at them. So normally with this automatic mode of breathing, so normally with the kind of breath management that we're doing throughout the day to some degree, we force past the subconscious tensions that are controlling our breath. Except when we're engrossed in something, then we'll find we're maybe not breathing so deeply. And that's where these tensions are controlling the breath. So when we release management, we're seeing these tensions have full influence on the breath. We're seeing what's actually here in our breathing pattern. And I could tell they were leaking out, these patterns. So as they played out, they were in a way resolving themselves. They were draining out the charge. And I can tell that over time with this practice, those tensions would flatten out and there'd be good, consistent breathing on their own. So this is one practice that I'm developing for clearing out the subconscious. The subconscious consists of an emotional world, a mental world. There's a world that dictating our breathing. There's other aspects of the human being that can be conscious or unconscious, buried. This is a really practical one, and it's a really deep one. I'll be developing some protocols that'll include this exercise. It'll be called something like automatic breathing protocol, and we want to get there to the point where we're no longer managing our breath anymore. Of course, unless we're doing some breathwork exercise or pranayama, we're not managing the breath. We're actually, and not even observing it, because observing in our minds tends to translate to some degree of management. We can't help ourselves. And we might not even notice that we're doing it. But with enough observing the breath, it'll probably become clear at some point. Oh, there's a deeper level I can go to, and that's just releasing. So I'll write about this on my Substack soon. Stay tuned for a little outline of this practice. Yeah. So that's it. Please like and comment. Let me know what you think and if you've experienced this in breathwork or any meditation where you can notice how you're managing the breath and that there's hooks, there's a desire to hang on to the breath rather than trust the body. And if you haven't already, subscribe. And I'm going to put a link to my Substack in the description. I just started that, and I'll be releasing writings 4 to 5 times a week at least. Till then, wishing you all well.